He hadn't touched a woman in 12 years, and when the first one finally stumbled into his arms, she was nearly broken beyond repair. James Coulter didn't expect much from life anymore. He lived quiet and alone up in the dry Arizona hills, with nothing but the wind and the heavy weight of memories he never spoke of. A cabin, a shotgun, and regrets older than the trees around him, that was all he had left. But that day, everything changed. She came crashing out of the treeline like death itself was chasing her, barefoot, filthy, barely wrapped in what looked like an old white curtain. Her arms were raw with scrapes, her lips cracked, her eyes hollowed with sights no one should ever have to see. She collapsed in front of him, no name, no scream, just two desperate words whispered through trembling lips, "Please don't." James froze. She wasn't bleeding much, but her body shook as if she'd crawled out of fire. When the cloth slipped from her shoulders, what he saw made his stomach twist. Her back bore burns, welts, scars, symbols carved deep into her skin like someone had written their cruelty into her flesh. James stumbled back, not from the wounds, but from the way she folded in on herself, as if she'd learned to vanish when the world grew too cruel. And in that moment, all he could see was Tennessee. The war. The girl he couldn't save. This time, he would not walk away. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, quiet, steady, like a promise. Then he carried her to the cabin, away from whatever hell had branded her. The cabin was warm, though the night air still bit at the hills. James laid her gently on the cot, her hands clutching his coat like it was stitched from safety. He didn't press her with questions. Instead, he built a fire, not for the warmth, but for the heartbeat of its crackle. Every creak outside made her flinch. Even the wind seemed to scare her bones. James made bitter coffee, sat at the table, and watched. She stayed curled tight, silent, but alive. And when, later that night, her eyes met his for the briefest heartbeat, something flickered, something human, buried under the pain. He nodded like a soldier who knew when words weren't needed. By morning, she whispered her first word, water. He handed her a cup, slow and careful. She drank, then looked at him longer than before. Not a plea, not thanks. Just one message in her eyes, I'm still here. That one word would start a chain of events no shotgun or silence could hold back. Days passed. She spoke little, but eventually sat beside him on the porch while he whittled wood. Staring into the trees, she whispered almost to herself, they used to make me clean their boots. Her name was Ellie. She spoke of a mining camp not marked on any map, where men were worked to death and punished like animals. She had run twice. The first time, they broke her nose. The second, they carved her back. James didn't ask about the third. Some stories wait for stronger days. But as the sun dipped low, the sound of hoofbeats broke the silence. James grabbed his shotgun. A man rode up in a fancy vest and greasy mustache, his cruelty easy to spot. He called her by name. Ellie rose. You got one chance to come back quiet. James stepped forward. She's not going anywhere. The man smirked. Ain't up to you, old-timer. James cocked the shotgun. This was his land. The man spat into the dirt and turned his horse, but the look in his eyes promised he'd return, with company. 3 tense days passed. James never left her side, his shotgun never far. Then, late one afternoon, the air grew too still. 3 riders came up the ridge road, the mustached man among them. Step aside, old man, he barked. James didn't move. The second rider reached for his belt. James fired first. The man screamed, falling with blood pouring down his leg. The other 2 froze. That's when a calm, steady voice cut through the tension. I'd think real hard about your next move. From the treeline stepped Abram Hale, James's old war brother, now sheriff of the territory. Badge on his chest, rifle in hand. This is my jurisdiction, and she's under my protection now. The riders didn't push further. They left, slow but bitter, and James knew it wasn't over. The cabin grew quiet again, but different now. Not haunted, not heavy, just quiet enough for a man to breathe without hating it. Ellie began to heal in small ways. She sat at the table for coffee. Helped with firewood. Laughed once, barely a breath, but enough. She brought wildflowers inside. He swept the porch for the first time in years. They didn't call it love. They didn't name it at all. But one night over stew, she asked softly, you ever think some folks were put here not to save others, but to give them space to save themselves? James didn't answer. He just nodded, because the wrong words might have broken it. Two people, a cabin, a slow healing that didn't ask permission. But out there in the West, there are always more Ellies running, and more Jameses thinking their story is over. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of not walking away. So ask yourself, who are you in this story? The one running, or the one who opens the door? If you want to hear more stories like this, real ones, rough ones, the kind that linger, stick around. Out here in the West, stories don't end. They just keep writing.